Now, to talk more on this, we are joined by Mr. Tony Gosling, investigative journalist from Bristol. Mr. Gosling, welcome to Press Again. Now, Mr. Gosling, the World Food Programme has warned that civilians in Gaza are to face immediate possibility of starvation because food and water have become practically non-existent. Now, I'll give you some stats. Bread is scarce or non-existent, as fuel shortages have triggered a crippling halt in bread production across all Gaza's 130 bakeries. Now, of the 1,129 trucks that have entered Gaza through the Rafah border, only 447 were carrying food supplies, and the food that has entered Gaza up to now is only enough for 7% of the people's daily needs. So my question is, why can't the international community find a solution to end this war, and what or who are the obstacles?
Well, I think one of the main obstacles is the mad dog nature of the Israeli Defense Force and the Israeli government at the moment. It's almost as if they are trying to, I mean, just think of what happened on the 7th of October, the attack, mainly a military attack by Hamas, which was spun into this attack on civilians, although there were attempts to take hostages. A lot of those hostages were then killed. In fact, some of them, testimony is that most of the hostages would have been killed by the IDF, not by Hamas. So the backlash reaction is, of course, massively over the top. So it's quite clear that many of the countries that might otherwise support the Palestinians realize that the Israelis have set a trap for them. They actually want to have a wider war because they know that this would bring in the United States more fully behind them and create an even bigger war that they believe would be for Israel's existence that the Americans would not be able to ignore. So they are really, I think, being extremely reckless. And many of the Arab states around, particularly Egypt, Jordan, and Lebanon, a little bit further away, Iran, they're all realizing that the Israelis actually want them to get involved militarily. So they're standing off rather because this is a powder keg here, and everyone realizes it. So the reason why I think the international community, if you want, is not doing more is a very simple fact that the United Nations Security Council, the veto is always invoked by the Americans. They've been doing this for many years, and this is a flaw in the system at the UN. But I think it's more important in a way to look at what the real motivation of the Israelis is here, and we have to understand that they are trying desperately to provoke a war. We've had mass civil society demonstrations against the Greater Israel bloc since this new far-right government of Netanyahu was elected. And in fact, even Israeli Zionists talking about Netanyahu's Greater Israel bloc has become a dictatorship. And so we're dealing with a very dangerous government in Israel, a nuclear-armed government. And that's why I think that there's been a certain amount of restraint. One thing that could, of course, happen is either the British Prime Minister or the American President could say that they no longer support the Israelis, that they demand a ceasefire. Then I think the guns would fall silent. But unfortunately, the Israel lobby is so strong. In fact, Britain and the United States have built up Israel. So it's very embarrassing for them to then say the Israelis have got to stop fighting back.
Well, we've seen it from Emmanuel Macron that he said that there should be an immediate ceasefire. Could we see this from the US or British government as well?
I would love to say yes. And of course, the British people have demonstrated in their hundreds of thousands. The latest demonstration, over 750,000 on the streets. But no, we have politicians here with tin ears. On both sides, in fact, of the Conservative ruling party and the Labour opposition, who are absolutely controlled by the Israel lobby, by the Labour Friends of Israel and the Conservative Friends of Israel. And so, although the public will definitely say it, in fact, many of the journalists even are saying it, who are not involved specifically in the Rupert Murdoch right-wing press, it's worth mentioning that the Murdoch press right across the United States and Britain and in Australia has been 100% behind Israel's war crimes, because Rupert Murdoch himself has got a big financial stake in the Golan Heights, in the oil concessions that he's taken with Jacob Rothschild. So these big media empires have a big financial interest in backing the Israeli state. So that's one of the reasons why the criticism has not been filtering out through those channels. But of course, many people nowadays, particularly young people, don't watch ordinary television or read ordinary newspapers. They're getting much of their information direct from the source, and also, of course, from countries like Lebanon and Iran, also from Turkey via the social media. And it's absolutely, I mean, one of the things that's been spreading very much on social media, I'm sure you've seen it, is yesterday's speech by Recep Tayyip Erdogan from Turkey, who is saying what everyone else in the rest of the world is thinking, including here in the West, most people anyway, that Israel is a terrorist state. And it's a bit rich for them to be accusing Hamas of being terrorists, when actually what they're doing is they are actually an armed force which is representing their own people's ability and need to fight back against an occupying oppressor who's breaking international law, not just in the bombing of Gaza, but every single day that they've been occupying the West Bank and Gaza.
Mr. Gosling, but the question is, would they be able to hold the Israeli regime accountable for their crimes?
Look, if the British government wanted to, if the Foreign Office wanted to, they could do it just like that. But I'm afraid what we've got is we've got a King Charles who's very much more hands-on than Queen Elizabeth was. We've also got a Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, and now a new Foreign Secretary, David Cameron, the former Prime Minister, who started the destruction of Libya. He was involved, of course, as well in the proxy war against Assad. So these people are all actually wedded to the whole Zionist project, which in a way, you could see it as a Jewish heresy. The idea that, that this paradise of Jews living in Jerusalem could be turned into something like this. Well, it's quite obvious that the Jews may be God's chosen people, but Benjamin Netanyahu and the Greater Israel Bloc are the diametric opposite. They are obviously not God's chosen people, because you can see by their actions.
That's right, sir. There you have it, Mr. Tony Gosling, investigative journalist, all the way from Bristol. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.